My name is Michael Tellinger, and we are sitting in the late afternoon on a pristine part of preserved human history right in the middle of Johannesburg, which is quite a miracle that they've actually managed to preserve this. A place called Melville Koppies, where we have evidence of human activity as far back as 200,000 years, just over behind these boulders behind me. And I want to talk a little bit about human history, the origins of humankind, its place in southern Africa, because this part of the world seems to have so much evidence of ancient human history that it actually quite boggles the mind. But it's not until recently that we started, relatively recently should I say, that we started seeing some of this evidence of early humans and what they did on this planet in this part of the world in southern Africa. As I said, this is called Melville Koppies, and just behind us over here is a beautifully preserved iron kiln where people of the past, it is still debatable as to how far back this kiln is dated, but people of the past were making iron out of iron ore. And it's an amazing spectacle to see, because here we have a kiln that was used by relatively recent human beings, Homo sapiens. They reckon maybe as recently as in the 1800s, using this kiln to make iron for their implements and so forth. And right next to it, about a meter down, is excavated the evidence of a civilization 100,000 years ago. And about a meter further, and a meter down, is more evidence of a previous civilization 200,000 years ago. So this is really just to prove a very important point, how archaeologists, or the basic simple rule in archaeology is that human civilizations over the ages build on top of each other. And here we have a pristine example in this absolute urban jungle called Johannesburg. In the middle of it, you've got this beautifully preserved ancient human history that allows us to look at early humans some 200,000 years ago and some remains that they've left behind, evidence of their habitation. This brings us to a further question. If this is indeed the cradle of humankind, and if this is in southern Africa where the first humans evolved or emerged and then moved on into the rest of the world from here, where is all this other evidence of these early humans? I was very fortunate recently to meet a chap by the name of Johan Heine, who has been doing tremendous amount of work and research into new stone dwellings and stone structures that he's been photographing for nearly 20 years now, from the air, being a pilot. And this has suddenly brought to light the evidence that we've been looking for. People like Dr. Cyril Hromnik has spent 30 years documenting and studying some of these ancient ruins in Mpumalanga. And he calls them Makumati ruins, the Makumati ruins, which incidentally comes from a Portuguese word called Makumates, which in turn was taken from a derivative of an Indian, a Dravidian term, a name for gold merchants from the Indian civilization that goes back 2,000 years, the Dravidian era in Indian history. There are other archaeologists and historians like Richard Wade, who have evidence of recent civilizations going back 2,000, 3,000 and maybe even 4,500 years to the same time that the great Indus Valley civilization was emerging, that at that stage already we had gold miners from the Asian continent coming down to southern Africa to mine for gold. And this is all very interesting, because now we start experimenting and with crossing over the parallel lines of biblical stories of King Solomon, where he got all his gold from, land of Ophir and Queen Sheba, and she had all the gold. And now suddenly we have evidence of civilizations in southern Africa 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 4,000 years ago that were here digging for gold. But now that is still relatively recent history. With a discovery that Johan Heine made about 5 years ago, came the notion that we may be looking at some of the earliest human structures ever found on Earth to date. He found some rocks in the ground which he started clearing and measuring, and to his surprise he realized that there was an ancient site which he called a calendar site, based on the way that these rocks were placed into the ground on top of a mountain and were meticulously and accurately demarcating the rise of the sun, the solstices, east, west, north, south. An absolutely beautiful specimen of early humans and their attempts at observing the movement of the sun. We've subsequently written a book about it, done many studies, and we called it Adam's Calendar. This book is released in July 2008, and hopefully you'll look out for it. And it deals with Adam's Calendar specifically because we've managed to trace back this history of this particular site to about 75,000 years ago. We used various techniques of finding this date, using astronomy, using archaeoastronomy, using geology, and also measuring the site very precisely with a land surveyor. What we found is that the entire site, Adam's Calendar site, these giant monoliths and the alignment with the geographical positionings of planet Earth are slipped by 3 degrees 17 minutes and 42 seconds, which now allows us to start playing with a time in the past when this particular site may have been constructed. What is amazing about this is that this particular site now predates any other known structure built by humans on planet Earth. Older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than the Mayan pyramids, older than anything you can imagine. Adam's Calendar is most likely 75,000 years old or even older.